Phils20 here and welcome back to Springwood. Last episode I was working on a lot of the problems that exist within Springwood. You can probably tell by now this is not a city that is functioning well. However, after a few of the things that I changed in the last episode, the city is looking a lot better and seems to be operating in more of a fashion that I think the game was originally intended for, which is pretty cool. A lot of those flashing icons have just chilled out and flashing a whole lot less. On the screen right now, you can see where the city ends, and there's this highway that pretty much marks the border of where I've been working on. And this is an area that I have neglected to build in for, well, pretty much the lifespan of Springwood. I actually built this highway. It was one of the first things I built prior to even releasing any episodes onto YouTube, and ever since building it, I haven't even touched anything around it. There hasn't been any neighborhoods really established, and everything that I've been working on has been in other locations. So this area has been really bothering me because it has just been completely blank for so long, and now that we've tackled a whole lot of other locations around Springwood, I have time now to actually work on this suburb. So because it is just a suburb, it's not really going to have anything that I think would be too iconic within the city. I wanted to take the sort of approach that this area was going to be a little more under-detailed than certain other locations. And because it is such a huge location, I wanted to go into this project mapping out a lot of the road networks first, and then start tackling different locations, I guess, in other episodes. So in today's episode, I'm just going to be solely working on road networks and road layouts. And that might not sound very interesting, but I think it turned out kind of interesting, to be honest. This is all footage that I just recorded anyway, and at the end of it I was like, well, that whole process was actually kind of cool, and I decided to share it with you guys just in general. So hopefully it is still interesting to watch. No detail at all, it's just purely roads and figuring out the layout. But in terms of tackling a big area, this is humongous. Like after building this road layout, I felt so inspired with this whole area, and just pumped so much life back into the city. I feel like it changed so much. And I think what changed a lot in my mind, at least, was I ended up deleting a lot of stuff that has been sitting in Springwood for a really long time. They've been massive eyesores. They've been sort of holding their location pretty well considering how old some of these locations are, but they definitely needed to be updated. So some things that you saw me delete. I started off deleting a interchange that I built ages ago that was purely there just to get traffic flowing into the downtown. And then you saw me delete an entire suburb that sat at the foot of the Springwood Mountain where the Springwood sign is on, and that whole area I'm going to dedicate to what is going to be kind of like Hollywood. I'm going to be taking a lot of inspiration from there. So that whole area is going to be full of like big mansions and a commercial district, and it's going to be a lot more affluent, but also have kind of like a bit more glitz and glam kind of an area that to be honest, I really can't wait to start building. I think we're going to get a whole bunch of really cool stories coming from there, because that place is just going to be full of different history and culture, and it's going to be very cool. So I'm looking forward to building that area. But I did really need to delete all that. That was built probably about 2.5 years ago, which is so insane. But I've just left it there because it's been quite nice to have as a bit of a backdrop. And what you see me working on right now, I built this highway. Well, it's not really a highway, it's a bit more of a bit more of an express avenue. I don't know, it's not really a highway, but it's definitely more than just a road. There's less roads, less streets attached to it, I guess. And this originally had the light rail system that headed up into the Springwood Mountain area, the Springwood Hills district, I should say, because that's what it's actually technically called. And I decided to change how the light rail interacted with this road, and decided to place down this avenue that I've always wanted to place down. I've barely placed it down in this game, and I've ended up putting in the light rail system, the light rail road, going right through the center of the medium strip, and this works so well. I can't remember which DLC this avenue came with, but as soon as I saw this thing released, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it, and I just had a really strong feeling that a light rail would probably stretch beautifully and fit very snug in the center of this medium strip. And this is my first time trying it out, and it works flawlessly. So this is a pretty cool area that I've only just mapped out. I'm going to put a lot more detail work into this thing later on down the track. And I've also changed the intersection in this area because I wanted there to be a lot more intersections, like giant sprawling highway junctions that really just separate different locations, different suburbs within the city. So you guys know that I hate building these things. I'm not great at building them either. I'd much rather leave that to the professionals, which is pretty much the workshop. And I ended up downloading a few of them, and the one that I think fits the best was this interchange that I pasted down. I think it's by Arisandi, who is on the Steam Workshop. He's got a whole bunch of really fantastic interchanges that I use all the time. I actually placed down another one of his, I think. I'm pretty sure it's one of his. But it's so good, and obviously it doesn't fit exactly, but just using Move It to just change a couple of the angles of the roads and to just change a little bit of the highway to sort of suit the landscape too, makes it look like it's been there forever. So that works really nicely. I very rarely build my own intersections. I only do that when there is just no other possible interchange that I can stick down there. But generally, I'll just get one from the workshop and just paste it down. And I kind of like seeing people's work get put into Springwood as well, and into my other projects. I think it's kind of nice seeing other people's work in there, and hopefully the people who make these interchanges can appreciate their work being in the project too. But they work very nicely. Again, a lot of the work that I'm doing is kind of temporary, or it's at least me just figuring out where some things are going to sit. So some of the angles of the roads are not quite right, and there might be a little bit of clipping every now and again, and I'm just leaving it because this is me just figuring out how things go. And sometimes I will go through and make sure all the angles are correct and the slopes are fine, and everything is so smooth and looks great, and then I'll just delete it and change something completely, and it's just a complete waste of time. So I'd much rather just paste down the general gist of where I want things to go, and then I can go in and detail some certain areas after that. And the traffic situation in this area is pretty good, to be honest. We will be cranking up the population quite a bit over the next couple of episodes because I plan to be building just purely houses and suburbs around this area, and there's going to be a lot of people coming in and out. These are pretty much the main roads coming into the city, so they're going to have to hold quite a lot of traffic. But something that I've always said within Springwood, I like traffic. Kind of means that I get to see the city being a little bit more realistic, because the cities just have traffic. So I don't really like seeing just purely flawless interchanges and just cars barely on the roads, because I do kind of like seeing a real bank up of traffic. So, you know, as much as I want to keep this thing, you know, making sure that ambulances can get to certain locations and people can get from one place to the other without despawning because it's just impossible for them to get there, I also like to see cars banked up a little bit, and you will also see that in the cinematics at the end, so you should definitely stick around for them because they're really good. Actually, you can see I'm actually giving you guys a lot more overviews with my cinematics of Springwood because I know that it is such a unique city in terms of how big the population is and how sprawling the city is becoming. I think you can probably appreciate the cinematics being a little bit more you know, embracing how big everything is. So I'm trying to show you a little bit more of the city as we build. And also the city is becoming a little bit more complete, so it's not so bad looking at an overview of the city, because it is starting to look just like a giant city rather than a half-finished project, I guess. And man, the amount of work we get done in this episode in terms of figuring out the road layout is just beautiful. And speaking of the road layout, I have to be honest, this is not the first time building all these roads. I actually had recorded this episode and the road layout was just a little bit more I guess more structured in these like rectangular road patterns. And I guess that's why I'm titling this episode Road Patterns, is because when I had originally built all the suburbs and all the road layouts around this whole area, I realized that it just looked very plain, and it also looked very unrealistic, just having just suburbs, just purely the same type of road layouts. And that's pretty much what you can see me doing right now, is just this type of road layout. And although there are a lot of suburbs that are just purely built with just these rectangular style roads, I realized that road patterns are so different without us even really realizing how different they are. And I guess it's because we're driving around these streets rather than looking from up above. I just realized that I really needed to encompass a lot more different sort of road patterns, and rather than just thinking I can just paint down a whole bunch of rectangular roads and think that's as easy as it is. So what I'm trying to do in this episode is trying to get ideas from a lot of different areas. I'm looking mostly around LA as well, just trying to figure out how different roads interact within the environment, and the reason why some, city planners build particular road layouts in, different sort of styles. So for instance, mostly the road layouts in LA at least do follow quite a rectangular style of road layout. However, I was really fascinated in this episode when I was just like doing a bit of research and seeing how some different areas have just very particular styles of roads. And there's some areas that will have these windy roads that seem to be a little bit more of an exclusive sort of community, where there's not quite as many roads connected up to the main highways. They're a little bit more secluded and a bit more private than other places. And I guess that's sort of their intention, is to be a little bit more like, this is like a private little community, so you should totally buy our houses. And then there's other areas, which is the area that I'm building in right now, that when they're a little bit closer to more highly dense areas, so closer to the downtown, there are a lot more roads that are either back streets or they're a little bit tighter together because they're just holding a lot more higher density houses. So around this area that I'm building right now, I'm trying to keep the roads a little bit tighter and placing down some of these back streets too. That, by the way, these back streets are awesome because they've got a little bit of worn out texture on them, and they're a little bit of a different color to the rest of their roads too. So they look totally different, which is awesome. And the roads that you can see me playing with on the outer skirts of the city are a little bit more free, so they've got a little bit more space to play with. They interact with the surrounding mountains too, which I wanted to also encompass the fact that this suburb, all these roads that I'm building, they start where they're a bit closer to the downtown, they're much tighter, they're a little bit more planned out. Whereas when they get a little bit further out of the city, which is where I'm working right now, the roads are a little bit more wider, and there's a bit more room for people to, have larger properties. And around these hills, I did want to have a much larger houses around this area. This is closer to where a lot of the wealthier residents in Springwood live, but it is also on the outer skirts of the city too. So closer to where Hollywood, Springwood Hills, I should be calling it, because that's the official name of that area. But Springwood Hills, that place is going to be just full of mansions. It's going to be really wealthy, and that's going to be its own sort of city. There might be a couple of smaller skyscrapers around that area, but I think that around this sort of place that I'm building around these hillside, I would like there to be a bit of a mix of bigger mansions, but also leave a couple of areas where I did want to have those pockets of smaller communities where developers have bought just whole blocks of land and have developed them into, I guess you can call them a little bit more unique sort of communities where they're a little bit more exclusive. There are only a couple of roads leading into them. I'm going to put up a couple of images from Google Earth of places that I'm talking about. We don't quite have as many of these areas within Australia. We are getting a lot more of these sort of areas as Sydney, at least, is getting a little bit more developed. I notice these sort of places more when I go overseas, particularly in the US. We are slowly getting to this sort of style of houses in Australia too. But I guess the aim of all this and all this planning is to sort of make sure that I keep that in mind when I actually go in and start building this whole area up. Originally, I thought I was going to build houses in this episode, but this took so long. This is one of the longest episodes for me to actually plan out and make. There's a lot of footage you're not seeing because there's a lot of me placing down a road and then going, nah, not there, and then placing another road and thinking, nah, not there. And I do that with a lot of these road layouts, and particularly trying to think about where houses and where communities are going to go. It takes a lot of time. And something else that I'm doing is also trying to imagine where roads used to connect up to. So you can see me playing with these roads that are divided by this highway, and I guess the idea is that these roads were once connected and then they built the highway and now they're disconnected, and the only road that is now connected is this main road, and that you can see actually is still connected up from either end. And this is so common, and I don't know why, but I always really love seeing this sort of stuff on Google Earth, and I generally spend most of my time just at least during this build, just flying around and going, I bet they used to be connected there, and I know why this area is different to that area. I find all that incredibly fascinating, and although I didn't really get time to talk about all that in this episode because we are already getting towards the end of it, I'll be talking a lot more about it in the next one. I'll make note of it because I guess this is sort of the theme for the next few episodes at least, because I'll be doing quite a lot of developing around this area. But far out, that episode ended so quickly. I have so much more to talk about, but I'll just have to leave it for the next episode. I'm going to make note of all the things that I missed out on. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave some nice feedback. That would be so helpful for me. If you haven't already checked out the Springwood Wiki, you should definitely go and check that out. It's a Wikipedia page all about Springwood, which is totally out of control awesome. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. But that is it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode. See you later.